Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today we have a massive topic on the table, poverty. But wait, don't jump to the usual arguments just yet. Yes, this time we're not looking at it through individual stories, luck, or misfortune. The sources we're discussing take us somewhere much deeper, to the very root of the matter.
We're going to look at it through a structural framework.
Exactly. We'll be analyzing it through the lens of Marxist theory, which seeks the cause of poverty not in personal failings, but in the operational principles of the system itself. From Marx to Engels, Lenin to Luxemburg, we're going to clarify the core arguments of this school of thought for you. So, where should we start to understand this big picture? There's a starting point that the sources insistently highlight: primitive accumulation. Come on, let's first understand what this concept actually means.
That's a great starting point, because this concept, so to speak, explains how the rules of the game were written in the first place.
What do you mean?
Imagine a scenario. You're a craftsman or a farmer with your own small plot of land and a few tools. To make a living, you don't have to wake up and go to someone else's factory. You don't have to sell your labor power to anyone.
So, you're self-sufficient.
Exactly. You can sustain your life using your own means of production. Now, primitive accumulation is the name of the historical process where millions of people were stripped of this very possibility. It's the mass dispossession of people from their land, their tools, and their workshops. In short, from the means of production. This often happened through processes like enclosure, forcing people into a position where they had nothing to sell but their own labor.
Wait a second, the word stripped or severed is key here. So it's not like these people just packed up their bags and left voluntarily because there were better jobs in the cities.
Not at all.
This theory claims there was a form of coercion involved. Am I getting that right? What kind of coercion are we talking about?
Exactly. That's actually the crux of the theory. This process wasn't a natural flow. On the contrary, it was a deeply painful and violent transformation. We can mention several methods. For instance, there's the process known as the enclosure movement in England. Think about it. Commons, pastures, and fields that peasants had used collectively for centuries were suddenly enclosed and turned into private property overnight through acts of parliament.
That's incredible.
People who had been grazing their animals or farming on those lands suddenly found themselves labeled as illegal squatters. Or their lands were seized due to debts owed to feudal lords. These people were suddenly left with nothing.
And they were left with only one choice.
Only one: to head to the nearest industrial city and look for work in the factories. So yes, this is a state of being pushed, a state of being forced.
I see. This completely changes the playing field. On one side, you have a small minority who owns the means of production.
Yes.
And on the other, a massive crowd with nothing left to sell but their own labor to survive. I believe this brings us to the second key concept, the wage labor system.
Precisely. These dispossessed masses must now sell the only thing they have left to survive, their ability to work, their muscle and brain power, as a commodity on the market. That is what wage labor is. You go to the factory in the morning, work for 10, 12, or even 14 hours, and at the end of the day, you're paid a wage to sustain your existence. But the most critical point of Marx's analysis begins right here, in the question of what that wage actually represents.
So, the I worked, I got paid, it's a fair deal equation isn't that simple.
Not at all. You can think of it this way. Imagine you have a 12-hour workday at the factory. In reality, you've probably already produced the value equivalent to your wage within the first 6 hours.
How so?
I mean, your first 6 hours of work generate enough value to cover your wage, the money you need for basic necessities like food and housing, so that you and your family can show up for work again the next day.
Okay, so what happens during the remaining 6 hours? Where does that go?
That right there is the heart of the theory. Everything you produce in those remaining 6 hours is what Marx calls surplus value. This is your unpaid labor, and it goes directly into the pockets of the capitalist, the owner of the means of production.
Wow.
Exactly. This surplus value is the very fuel that allows capital to grow, generate profit, and accumulate.
That's a truly striking perspective. So, as the system produces wealth, is it also regenerating poverty through this very same mechanism?
Precisely.
Because while one side is constantly accumulating wealth, thanks to this surplus value, this unpaid labor of others, millions of people on the other side continue to work for a wage that is just enough for their subsistence. It's a vicious cycle then.
Exactly. The concept of surplus value is used to explain why poverty isn't a glitch or a temporary bug in the system, but rather an inseparable structural component of it.
I see. From this perspective, the massive accumulation of wealth at one pole and the accumulation of poverty and insecurity at the other are just two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other.
Right. This theoretical framework is very powerful, but these concepts can feel a bit abstract. What did this actually look like in people's daily lives back in the 19th century? Let's talk about Friedrich Engels' work at this point.
Yes, it's as if Engels took the theory and put his finger on the pulse of the streets. How do his observations make this picture more concrete for us?
That's exactly what Engels does. He gives the theory flesh and blood. Despite being the son of a factory owner himself, he went into the working-class districts of cities like Manchester, the heart of the Industrial Revolution, talked to the people, and noted what he saw with the precision of a detective.
And what did he see?
The scenes he describes are truly horrific. He talks about multiple families living in a single, windowless, unventilated room in basements. He documents sewage flowing through the streets, the lack of clean water, and how diseases like typhus and cholera spread like wildfire because of it. He shows people returning to these conditions, utterly exhausted after a 14-hour workday.
So, poverty isn't just a lack of money in one's pocket. It's something much more comprehensive. It's a condition that engulfs every aspect of life.
Yes. The most important thing Engels shows us is this. Poverty is not just an economic data point. It is also a spatial phenomenon. It manifests itself in the very way cities are planned.
Right.
There's a stark divide between the airy, wide-streeted neighborhoods where the wealthy live and the cramped, sunless back alleys of the workers. Poverty is felt in the very air you breathe, the water you drink, and even the dampness on your walls.
That's very clear. But did this massive transformation only happen in large industrial cities? What happened to those who stayed in the villages, in the countryside? At this point, we can look into Lenin's analyses.